Hi, guys. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
We're so happy to be back in our little safe space. We had such an energizing conversation with our guest today that I think is not only so relevant for everything that's been going on in our home city of Los Angeles this last week, but in the world today. And we're so excited for you to meet Eddie Herrera, who sits with us in the safe space today and shares all about his journey from incarceration to being a firefighter today.
Yep. Eddie walked his path through 18 years of incarceration. He worked really hard on his evolution as an individual, and he made his way to an institutional firehouse where he was a firefighter for the prison grounds, but then also for the surrounding community while he was still incarcerated. And then upon release, he was able to pursue a career in firefighting, and he has now been a career firefighter as a free man for 4 years.
He is not only so inspiring, but I think this conversation is so relevant in what I'm seeing so much on social media and what I feel so grateful to see big publications talking about, which is the use of incarcerated individuals to fight fires and help our communities in these ways. And he really breaks down the pathway to how you're able to have that opportunity as an incarcerated person and the nuances of it all, but also just how much investment and rehabilitation can change someone's life, and also just investment into self, because his journey really started with him asking himself tough questions and picking up books and trying to understand how his brain worked and how his spirit felt. And so I have so much respect for him. I'm so grateful for him taking the time. He has 4 beautiful kids and he is on year 4 of freedom and has so many things going on. So it was such an honor to have any of his time. And I think that this is such an important conversation and a really, really informative one too.
Totally. We have been met with the conundrum this week in Los Angeles that someone that we can be taught to be terrified of, or that we can be taught to demonize and label and dehumanize, can actually be somebody that we look to for help and in times of crisis to save our lives. So this conversation is super important. Eddie has a gorgeous spirit, very palpable, calm, composed energy that he's earned through years of hard work on himself. So thank you, Eddie.
Thanks, Eddie. Eddie the legend.
Okay, Eddie, I'm so excited. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be here. And
Eddie the legend. Eddie the legend is in the house.
Oh, wow. That's funny. I've never been said that. I've always been said Fast Eddie and other things, but not that. So that's crazy.
Eddie the legend. Okay, well, we are living through some crazy times right now in Los Angeles, and you are probably the perfect person to be talking to today. So obviously these wildfires are going on all around LA, threatening people's property, threatening their lives. It's been a terrifying and crazy journey. And luckily, we have seen an increase in conversation about firefighters who are incarcerated, who are formerly incarcerated.
Right.
And it gives us the perfect opportunity to learn as a community what this process is like and educate people, and also give you an opportunity to tell your incredible story that we've heard a small fraction of. And I'm so excited for people to hear it today. So before we get into all the firefighting stuff, I want to just get to know you and your background. So we're going to take it way back. And if you could just tell me a bit about where you come from and your youth, what your perspective was like on life and how your life circumstances in your younger years kind of shaped you.
For sure. So I grew up in a small town in Ventura County. It's called Fillmore.
Okay.
Good, wholesome values. Until I was 13 or 14, I lived there. My 2 sisters, my mom and my dad. And it wasn't until my parents moved to Oxnard, and then I started hanging around with a different crowd. But actually, let me back up when I still lived in Fillmore. So at a young age, when I was 5 years old, I experienced abuse, sexual abuse from a family member. It only happened one time, but it was enough to affect me and shape me in a way where I stopped me in many ways.
Wow.
So when I experienced that, it changed me where as I grew up, my esteem was low. Though I still exuded, like I had confidence in many things, internally, I was hurting.
Yeah.
And, my esteem was always low of myself. So as I was getting older, I noticed I started to gravitate to a different crowd. And this is when my family moved to Oxnard and eventually Los Angeles County. And I believe that was when I turned 17. I was already out of school. I had dropped out 10th grade. And at this time, I was already on the streets. At 16 years old, I had already, I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but my mom was like, if you don't abide by my rules, there's a door. And she called, I don't know if she was bluffing, but I called her on her bluff. And I said, all right, I left. Like a year later, my mom, or my dad actually, was like, hey, can you come to the house? And I came to the house and he's like, we're going to be moving to Los Angeles. Would you like to come? We just have one rule. Either you go to school or you get a job. And so I was like, okay. So I went. And that was, I would say, where everything changed. Coming to an environment like that, where it was like so big, but I was just hanging around with the wrong crowd. I gravitated towards that because I was able to put up a facade, you know what I mean? A tough guy facade thinking, but internally I was hurting,
So you really feel like that stemmed from what you experienced when you were younger?
100%, because I don't believe if I had ever experienced that, I wouldn't have felt that shame, Shame was the biggest one, I think, that was the root of it. And I learned years later, how that works and did a lot of work, to change that shame into a positive, you have, so dropped out of school, but I went to like a trade school and got certification in telecommunication. Cool. So I ended up doing that. And by 19, I was making really good money legally.
Wow.
Can I ask, were gangs a part of your story?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And a lot of it was attributed to, I was trying to do two things, still be a good man as far as like at that time I wasn't married, but then when I got married, I was a husband, but I couldn't be a good husband because at the end of the day, I had too much shame and I felt like I didn't deserve certain things. Right. So I was self-destructing. And one of them was I gravitated towards like, obviously, drinking, where there escalates to other things, and that was my life. And so for many years, I remember just being numb and just not being aware who the people I was hurting at that time, Yeah. And then during this time, like you said, gangs, gravitated towards that, had a lot of friends that were in gangs. And so I associated myself in that environment and just being a part of it just seemed normal, It was like, it didn't seem odd to me, But I will say this, one thing that always makes me think is like, there were many a times that when I'd have conversations with my mom, like she'd want me to see her or talk to her, and I felt a lot of shame. Like I didn't want her to see me in this condition, right? Yeah. And so I stayed away from her. And those are the things I regret. And I remember her vividly saying this one thing. She's like, son, I don't care what's going on with you. I just want to see you, be next to you, And I was just too ashamed, And so I chose to just be out there on the streets. And it was doing that is what led me to, committing my crime and getting locked up, Yeah.
So, would you be willing to tell us a bit about what happened, your crime? And
yes, absolutely. No problem. So being involved in that life and that lifestyle, it was just normalized, like just the stuff that was going on. And guns was normal, drugs. And so for me, I was struggling with alcohol. And I remember during that time, I was like, struggling to try to live two lives. And I wanted to slow everything down, but I didn't know how. And what's today's date? January what?
13th.
I believe it is exactly this day. I want to say the 13th or the 14th, because it was at 2, 3 in the morning, I was arrested.
Wow.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
What year was that? 2004.
Wow, crazy.
It's so when I think, if I do the days correctly, because it happened like at 3 in the morning, you know?
Yeah.
But anyways, I remember my wife, who we were separated at the time, but still my wife, I get a call from a buddy of mine who's, from the neighborhood, and it's like, hey, come on down. They're having a party and getting together. And I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna go. And I remember her saying to me, my ex-wife, she's like, don't go, stay here.
God.
It was like 10:30
always
at night.
The story.
So 10:30, I went. A buddy of mine, was there that we're good friends, and he had a gun. And at that time, the surrounding area they lived in, there's a lot of crime, a lot of gangs, a lot of crime. And I had 2 co-defendants, And it just so happened to be like at 2:30 in the morning. We had all been drinking. Bright idea to do something stupid. One of them says, hey, why don't we just rob this guy? And so I'm the driver. I think nothing of it, you know, because it's like I said, this was the life. I pulled over and one of them gets out of the car. We didn't rob anybody with the gun, but there was a gun in the car. And that's what got me for my crime. But anyhow, my victim, I think about it now. I put myself in his shoes and I was like, man, that guy was really afraid for his life. Because I would imagine if I was there, how I feel. He called the cops, and I would say no less than 15 minutes later, we're getting followed. And I knew the police were behind us. And, you know, we had a helicopter, and this is like 3 a.m. and was arrested right there. And never after that, I went to trial, actually. I was offered a deal, but I didn't take the deal because at the time I was like, well, I didn't go out and rob him. I was the one just driving the car. But laws is like, you're an accomplice. So.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your sentence. I know we had kind of previously talked about it, but.
So I was sentenced to 2 years for attempted robbery and 20 years for gun enhancement. And at that time, the gun enhancement was mandatory. So if you go to trial, judge's hands are tied. You don't have the discretion to strike it or anything, even if you don't believe that you should have it. So I went to trial, and because I did not know at the time, obviously not having money at that time to have a good attorney or nothing to defend me, he never advised me that the attempted robbery carried a 20-year gun enhancement. So when I went to trial, I was under the assumption I was looking at the highest time I'd look at was 3 years, lowest 16 months. So that's what was my train of thought.
Wow.
How old were you?
25, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, 25. Yeah.
So you would have been given a deal.
I was offered a deal. I was offered 2 years with half with a strike. And I didn't want the strike because in my mind, I still believed that I can get my life together and I can, you know, do something good and just better myself. So I denied it.
Yo.
Yeah. And that when they offered that would have been time served, meaning they would have released me right there.
So
Wow.
You would have been let off with time served, and instead you were sentenced to 22 years.
85%. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us what was going through your head when you're sentenced to 22 years as a 25-year-old for something that you thought you would potentially be walking out of there for, you know, in ways. And also off of that question, early time or early years in prison, kind of how did you conduct yourself and what was your mentality going into that situation?
Yeah. So during the sentencing and the whole journey, it was a roller coaster. It's an emotional roller coaster, especially because I went through Los Angeles County. And Los Angeles County, there's a saying that if you can survive Los Angeles County jail, you can survive anywhere.
So this is widely talked about on this podcast because Ryan, I remember one of the last times I saw him in person, you know, I ask too many questions. I'm the most curious person.
Yeah.
And he had been to 7 different prisons, had been in multiple shoes, you know, had been in and out of juvenile hall and county jail and all these things. And he stood firm in that LA County Men's Central was the scariest, worst place you could be. And then we had Frankie Carrillo on the podcast and he was like, add my name to that list. That is the absolute worst place you could be. Everyone says the same thing. So I'm glad we're adding Eddie Herrera to that list.
So true. I experienced some crazy shit in there. Like I saw a lot, was a part of a lot. And I remember being involved in a riot with the deputies in there.
Yeah.
And And then as far as once in prison, you're asking, I started off in level 4. So my introduction to it was starting off at a reception center where it was a riot and then ended up going to the hole. 2 weeks off the bus, having a riot with the COs and being slammed down for like 3 years. So to answer your question, being in there, it's just survival. You're just in the state of survivability, right? And you adjust to your environment. And I learned to just accept things and gave up all things of the streets. Like it didn't exist for me, like family, friends, because I was going to get me killed. There would be situations where like, if you started thinking of like that, like home and the hope, like you were just not going to probably make it. So
why?
Because when you're put in situations like when it comes to like the prison system and being involved in or associated, because there's obviously groups, you're asked to do things you don't even want to, but because especially like level 4s, it's very racist. Like if something cracks off a riot, you know, you have to get involved. There's no question, right? So sometimes you just don't know if you're going to make it.
So you were doing what you felt you needed to do to survive for a long time.
Right.
I hate to say, can you tell us about some of your personal lows? But I want to understand the obstacles that you had to overcome
For sure.
while you were there.
Yeah, the lows would definitely be lack of communication with family, loved ones. So I have 3 children, but they were younger. Not being able to talk to them, see them, weighed heavily on me. It was hard.
So that was self-imposed. You kind of put a wedge between you and your family and didn't have a relationship at the time, even with your children.
Yes and no. One was because we couldn't use phones. There was no access to it. We were locked down all the time. So for like 3 years, we didn't have phone calls.
Wow.
So the only form of communication was through the mail. And then when you did receive your mail, it would probably be like 3 to 4 months later. And a lot of that was attributed to because it was part of that repercussion we were receiving because we were being slammed down because of the riots towards the deputies and their life feeling threatened. So like, okay, you're going to mess with us, I'm going to mess with you. And so we wouldn't get packages, we wouldn't get store, we wouldn't get anything. And one of them being phone calls, right? So, and even that, because I wasn't assigned to a job or anything, you only get 1 phone call a month. So as you can see, the pattern, there's a lot of separation there, relationships. I believe that truly family relations and having some type of relationship with someone out there, loved ones, having that is very important, vital to people's rehabilitation.
It's everything.
And mental health. It's so important. And so for me, that was one of the lows and very challenging. Like I hit a lot of lows because of that, not feeling loved, feeling like forgotten. It's just when you're just not hearing from anybody and all you're seeing is just negatively all around you, it's like,
wow,
it weighs
that's
on
real
you.
Shit, yeah.
It weighs on you, and that's why I understand why there's so much mental health issues in the prison system, because it's like when you go to lower level yards, you have more privileges and more access to stuff. But level 4s was completely different.
Yeah.
You're deprived of so many things. And I get it. It's because it's part of that, hey, you're higher security and we're going to keep you in line. But it's challenging, it's challenging to be able to make it through those times and just not have communication, no visits,
Wow.
And then eventually when you do have access to visits or the privileges, it's behind a glass window for like 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So
We've done that many times.
And it's like, I used to tell, and I will share this with you about my mom. I would always tell my mom, I'm okay. Don't come visit me.
Mm-hmm.
Don't come visit me. Because I was always worried about her and traveling and something happening, right?
Yeah.
And so then I remember years later when we actually had a chance to talk openly, she said to me, for many years, I listened to what you said. She goes, but did you ever consider that I knew what I was doing and I was willing to do it? She goes, you took that away from me. I realized I was being selfish. I was thinking about myself, how I would feel and how it hurt me, right? But I never considered how much I was depriving her from all that. And after that, I told her, Mom, never again. That's your choice, 100%.
Yeah.
So,
wow. I also think a lot of people who are incarcerated, of course, feel like there are such few ways that they can contribute to their family's lives and stuff. And so sometimes they can feel like a way of contributing is by, in their minds, like easing some sort of burden on their family for coming to see them or something like that. 100%. And so they think they're doing you a favor or contributing something when really you're like, it will ease my spirit to be able to connect with you and have, share love and feel like we can give you the connection that you need in there. Because when we would go see Ryan, he would come out to a visit at peak agitation and frustration and pain. And then throughout the visit, it would be a journey of going from this high level of stress to ease by the end of it and safety and comfort within his family, And your mom is right that like it's crucial for us all to get to connect and not just on the phone for 15 minutes, but in a way where we can hold hands or at the very least be like look into each other's eyes when we speak and feel that humanity between us, because it's like you start to forget how like dehumanized you are being. And then you get around your loved ones and you're like, whoa, this warmth, I forgot what this felt like. And Ryan would write about that in his journal, that the energy that he would get when we would come see him or his loved ones would come see him was completely different than what he was accustomed to on the day-to-day, and it was so necessary for his survival. And
it's crazy because I didn't write about any of that, and the reason why was because of they would take stuff from us and they would use stuff against us to, like, you know, hey, we're gonna get you in line. So like writing, like they can go through all your stuff, they know about you, your vulnerabilities. You couldn't be vulnerable. You couldn't show these things, right? So like,
because the police officers would read your
everything. There was everything. You had no privacy, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I learned real quick: don't show emotions. Do not show like any sense of vulnerability. And I learned that early on. Like they say, like when they search your cell or they take something from you. I remember a good buddy of mine once telling me, he was a lifer, and he would say, don't ever let them get a rise out of you. Never show them that your emotions. Never let them see that they got you, because the minute you do, they can control you. And so why not minimize what they can take from me? So for many years, like I remember, like I wouldn't sleep on a mattress. I just sleep on the bare metal, because that was a form of them being able to say, hey, we're going to take your mattress away from you. Or so for almost 15 years, I just said, I don't sleep on the mattress. You can have it. And I just slept on the bare metal.
So you deprived yourself so that they couldn't deprive you.
100%.
Yo.
Yeah.
That is insane and fascinating.
Yeah.
That is so, but I understand exactly where your head was at. You know what I mean? Just, we talk about this all the time. Prison is one big experience of loss. Everything reminds you of what you have lost. And so having more taken from you, that makes so much sense in like a really fucked up, sick way. But I completely get it of just being like, no, I will strip myself bare so that you can't hurt me any more than you already have.
That was it. I deprived myself, like you said, of many things just for survival, which is as we get it in later in, I can share with you about that sleeping on a bunk. One that ended up being our firehouse, right?
Yeah.
My captain, you know, I'm transitioning now. I'm still sleeping on the middle bunk. And so then when I get to a firehouse and he shows us like where we're going to be sleeping, there's actual beds and mattresses.
Oh.
Yeah. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to sleep on this. So I asked him, I said, by any chance, do you have something I could put on the mattress so I can sleep? And I slept on the board the first night. On top, I put it on top of the mattress and slept on that. And I was cool. I felt good, obviously. And then I remember, this is where testing for change and see if you can change, capacity for change, where my captain was saying, how did you sleep, Eddie? And or Mr. Herrera. And I was like, oh, I slept good. He goes, how about we try sleeping on the mattress tonight? I said, yeah, sure. I'll give it a shot. So mind you, I had already done that almost 15 years, but it was like, I want to see if you're going to be open to change, because the environment I was now is like, you know, I have to be teachable. I have to be able to learn to do what I'm doing, to be a public servant, even though I'm incarcerated.
Yeah.
So, he said, okay. And I slept on the mattress. It was hella uncomfortable. My back was messed up, but like anything, the human body is amazing. It will adapt, it will adjust and do what it's got to do.
Wow. What a fascinating story of just how how adaptable we are as humans, and what we're used to is what we're safe with, even if it's uncomfortable. We just find comfort in what we know. Yep. You know what I mean? And yours was a metal bunk. I'm curious, kind of what was the event or series of events that kind of moved you to change how you were living and moved you into this new, actually, I think really brought you back to who you actually are. I think that's so much of what change and growth is moving us right back to who we actually are and away from our mask, you know?
That journey and that part of change came years later after that. It wasn't until this level 3 I was at, there was a lot going on there. I believe at that time in 2009, it was the most dangerous prison in California, because the assault amount that was happening was like 42 assaults, if I'm not mistaken.
Where was it? What prison?
Pleasant Valley Sea Yard.
Ryan, you were on that yard with Ryan.
Yeah.
You were actually on that yard with Ryan. That's crazy.
It was a crazy experience, because I went through so much mental and emotional roller coasters being on that yard, but I wound up in the hole from there, you know, once I was there. And once again, being in the hole, just feeling like lost, hopeless, right? Being in that cell, I really dug deep. So you're asking me about the change. I would say it started right there.
Okay.
Because it allowed me to do the one thing I needed to do, which is reflect.
Okay.
I needed reflection time without distractions. But in that process, like many of my thoughts, that's when I really started to focus on like the healing or the journey of healing of the abuse, right? Like acknowledging that, recognizing it, and then the pattern, the causative factors of why I found myself where I was at.
So you started to explore that on your own with kind of no prompt. Yeah. It was just life had led you to this place where you were in solitude, and
that was
you chose to dive into that.
That's it. And it's a scary thing. So a lot of guys go crazy. They can't handle it, commit suicide, hang themselves. But for me, that was where trauma, learning about processing my trauma, talking about it. I would talk out loud to myself. Like that was how I preoccupied myself. It's crazy. But for me, I'm grateful that, I never lost that sense of reality. Some people just never come back from that, But I learned to like do that and just have this conversation with myself. So therefore I was like, hey, you're okay,
Yeah.
And I just started doing that. And then it wasn't until that month when my birthday was coming up, she wasn't even my girlfriend at the time, but she was my friend. She came and visited me with my mom. I just remember being so excited to have any type of like contact,
Yeah.
She uplifted my spirits big time. Because like I remember seeing her walking up and I'm like, who is this person with my mom? And I was like, oh, wow, that's Daisy.
Wow.
And then we just had this conversation that it just went like that. Those little brief moments got me through like years of like stuff,
Wow. So your now wife, then friend,
correct,
came to visit you with your mom when you were in the hole. And that was kind of a catalyst for you to remember your humanity and start to move forward into a new way of living.
Yeah.
Paired with the introspection that you were already engaging with.
Yeah, definitely. I had to do the introspection is like, that's, is I had to go within. But it was definitely a journey. I started after that. I did start writing a little bit more and being able to express stuff. And then, I just found ways to just do the work. And so.
Yeah. What were the resources and the tools that you found that helped you?
So I started to get into a lot of like psychology and philosophy. I started reading. I started processing a lot of it and realizing, okay, how does this work for me? How's this? And as I was doing it, the next thing I started to learn was how the brain operates. Like I started learning a lot about neuroscience, right?
Cool.
And I was like, wow, this is fascinating. Okay, well, what does this mean to me? Because where I'm at, there's nothing I can do about it. But I learned that once I was actually out there on the yard or just being out, integrate and be able to move around, application. So the brain takes 21 to 45 days consistency to develop a new pattern and habit, right? So I consistently started to practice these things. I started to do these little things and it started to become second nature to me. And that was it. Like, it was like, okay, learn what you learn. Okay, now just put it to practice.
Can I ask you, so because you've said multiple times that certain behaviors, you can only talk to certain people. When you're asked to do something, you do it. Your association with different groups is oftentimes for your survival. So now, once you had kind of started to create a new path for yourself, how were you able to separate yourself from those other influences that you had been moved by?
So I learned early on that I'm a firm believer that negative thoughts create negative actions, positive thoughts create positive actions, and like being consciously aware of the energy you attract, right? So I learned early on that people that I gravitate to were either on that same mindset and journey, right? And the ones that weren't, I would just like still treat them like equal and good and not really like seem like you're better in any way.
Yeah.
Stay humble. It's just being humble. But that's how I navigated.
Just kind of stay low.
Yeah. And just, just try not to stand out. But then at the same time is little by little, the little things is I noticed when people needed help on something, whatever it is, was just be there, be kind. I started to notice like if you treat people like that, it doesn't matter where they are. They're going to be receptive to that. They're going to treat you good. Then, you know what I mean? They're not going to want to do anything negative towards you. Right. So like that was my practice. Like it didn't matter. Even when I was in the hole and like my so-called enemies in there, respect, treat them no matter what. But then it was crazy. Like we knew like for any reason, if those doors cracked, it's game on, right? Like you have to. Yeah. So it was like, but behind there is like these people are anybody. They're not my enemy. Like, they're not my enemy.
God, it's got to be so hard to play the game when you start to have those like aha moments because you're kind of just connecting the dots of shared humanity between yourself and other people. And then it's like, fuck, how am I supposed to jump back on that train of thought when now I'm like, well, that's kind of bullshit. That's not true. You know, like this person is
100%.
You talk about, you know, the abuse that you experienced. And we've had many men sit on this couch and share the same thing with us.
And thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. But it's just got to be so hard to kind of straddle those worlds when your mind is expanding, but you still feel like, okay, well, I've been doing this forever and I have to I have to appease everybody.
So when and how did the idea of fire camp enter your existence?
So prior to my incarceration, I was struggling and going through this journey. I remember going to job fairs for like firefighters and all that. And this was in LA and Crenshaw. And I remember going to one of them thinking like, hey, man, this is something that I think I want to look into. Well, no later than like 2 months after that, I was arrested. So it was like already like there in my head, but I just like put it away. Well, then I was in a holding cell one day and somebody tells me, it's like, hey, man, I'm going to try to get to fire camp, And I was like, he shared with me a little bit about it. And I was like, oh, man, I didn't know you can do that. Cool. So I was like, in my head, I was like, I want to do that. Little did I know that you have to meet the criteria. You have to have a certain security level.
What are the criteria?
So you have to have under 5 years. You have to be low custody, and you cannot have certain crimes.
So what does low custody mean for people who don't know?
So low custody, so you have low custody, medium custody, and then high custody, right? And then minimum custody would be low. But those levels are based on a point system. So they allocate these points to you based on when you're sentenced and based on certain factors. Age at the time you committed your crime, marital status, gang affiliation.
Your point system has to do with marital status?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They'll check all that. Were you married before? All this, because it's all where you're at up here, right? So they have this and they base it on like, have you been arrested before? You know, it's called the California Static Risk Assessment. So anyways, I don't know if they still use this system, but anything under 19 points is considered low custody, right? And you can go to level ones. So for me, I wasn't eligible to go because the amount of time I was serving, right? I was high custody. So I think it was after 52 points is when you're level 4. So anyhow, my train of thought going into it was like, yeah, whatever happens, I want to see if I can get to fire camp. Well, when I was being sentenced, I didn't know that I wasn't going to be eligible, but I asked my attorney, I said, hey, can you request if I get recommended to go to fire camp? And he was like, okay. So he asked the judge, and I still have it on my minute orders. He's like, I'm going to recommend fire camp. You know, it would be good to do something for.
This was when you were initially being sentenced way back in the day?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you did know that fire camp was kind of like a possibility? It was a thing?
It was a thing.
Okay.
But there were certain criteria and factors, and I didn't know that I didn't fit those criteria, right?
Okay.
So yeah, it was more like a dream to kind of get there, like the hope, right? But yeah, once I found out, like I'm in my head, I'm thinking like, yeah, I can maybe get to fire camp. As soon as I got to reception, all that went out the window. My counselor was like, you're going to level 4. Before you can even attempt to even get to any of that, it's going to take you a long time.
Yeah.
So I was like, I gave it up. I was like, So yeah, so that's what fire camp's all about. The ones that are in there are anywhere doing under 5 years. And I think they changed that criteria recently. I think they moved it up a couple years. And another thing was like, you couldn't have a violent crime.
Yeah.
You could have and I had a violent crime. Technically, attempted robbery is considered a violent crime.
Yeah.
Well, what definitely made it violent was the gun enhancement. So anyways, I was what they call a P-coded, meaning I cannot go no lower than level 2. So actually getting to fire camp was not, going to happen.
Okay. So it's essentially the lowest custody people generally don't have violent crimes.
Criteria
And this was a criteria previously, but less than 5 years left on their sentence.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And then, of course, you had to demonstrate certain criteria, also write-ups. You couldn't have any write-ups, 115s and things. And they go through a vetting process. But that isn't to say that individuals that are coming in from like LA County, Ventura County, different areas, when they get sentenced, if they are under 5 years, right, they're already going to be minimum custody or low custody. They can get sent straight to fire camp. So like my journey is very different. I actually had to work to even get close to going there, right? Other individuals, that's the difference, like earning it and just being like, here, we're going to send you to fire camp.
Yeah.
You know? So a lot of guys, and I don't know, gals now to also are doing it I do believe they have a couple crews, but they can go straight from county once they get sentenced to go to fire camp because they fit the criteria based on time. And obviously they don't have any write-ups because they haven't been in prison yet. So they'll send them and then they go through the process, the training. And if they can make it, then they'll be able to do it.
So how were you able to overcome the barriers with your sentence and that type of stuff to get there?
So it was a long journey because it wasn't until I think I had 7 years left. I remember a buddy of mine saying, he was telling me, he's like, hey, I'm going to see if I can get to fire camp. And I was like, oh, wow. Yeah. Fire camp sounds like something I'd like to do. But I had to first demonstrate that I can have my P code that was on my C file removed. So I had to earn that, meaning demonstrate I'm programming, staying out of trouble. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Doing positive stuff, productive stuff. And so I asked my counselor one day, I said, you know what? I'm getting close. Do you think it'd be possible if I can have my P code removed? And she's like, well, let's talk about it next year. You know, so I was like, okay. Then the next year came and I was like, you know, I'm doing good. You know, I'm taking a lot of these programs, being active in these programs and facilitating, you know, do you think it'd be possible? And she saw that there was a lot of positive things I was doing. And I talked to her and she says, you know, I've heard good things about you, you know, so I'm going to recommend that we remove your P code. Cool. So I went to committee and now I knew it was like another journey because I knew now that I was level 1 eligible. So I was like, I don't know where they're going to send me if they don't give me fire camp, you know, where am I going to go? So that's when I put in the petition and request to go to fire camp. They granted it. I was supposed to go to Jamestown first and then second Susanville. And then all of a sudden, all that got changed at the last minute because they said there was so much stuff going on over there that they couldn't send us over there at the time. They stopped basically everything. So I got redirected and I went to a different prison, level 1, and this was in Ione. So
Mule Creek?
Mule Creek.
Yeah.
So I landed on the level 1 in Mule Creek, but I found out that they had a firehouse and I petitioned and requested to go to the firehouse when I got to the yard. It wasn't happening because the associate warden reviewing my file and everything, they're like, I mean, this guy's never been a level 1 and never worked outside the gate walls. How can we trust him, you know? So they put me on hold until I can demonstrate. So I think it was like a month or so that I just worked out, got a job in the warehouse, worked and passed by the firehouse every other day and was like, I'm going to be there one day, you know, I'm going to be there, you know.
Aww.
And then so I remember, and sure enough, I had a good referral from my boss that I had. And sure enough, my counselor said, I'm going to put in a word with you, with the captain.
Amazing.
Yeah. And so then I got interviewed.
Okay. So once you got to fire camp.
Well, it's not fire camp. So institutional firehouse is different than fire camp. When you go to fire camp, so for instance, what you're seeing now, which is hand crews, they operate differently. There's a 13-man hand crew.
Yeah.
And they go, before they can even do what they're doing, they have to go through a training. So they go to a separate prison, whether it be Jamestown or Susanville, and they got to do their fire training and their physical training. And then once they complete that, then they can get sent to whatever, you know, camp. And then now they're at that camp and housed there. And then whenever the fires happen, then they go fight them. Mine was different. I was actually housed at a firehouse outside the prison walls.
Wow.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay. Now I'm understanding what you've been saying. Okay. Because you said this the other day and I was like not putting.
Yeah.
So was it a special privilege or is it?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Sounds like a very special privilege.
Yeah,
Well,
for
I
sure.
just didn't know if it had ever been done, if this was completely
I didn't know this was
unprecedented,
even
or
a
if it was
thing.
just rare.
So there's 34 adult prisons in California, and every prison has a firehouse there. However, it's designed to run your nuisance calls, whether it be fire alarms or cell fire or certain things, medical calls, on the prison grounds. So ideally, that's what they're designed to do. It's like they don't have the resources there, so we're going to have an inmate firefighter do this, right? And they got to go through a lot of training. But certain prisons actually, or certain firehouses, have what they call mutual aids with the county, which therefore you work in the capacity of a municipal firefighter, institutional firefighter. So you actually drive outside the prison gates into the community and service the community.
Got it.
Which is what I did.
Got it.
Yeah.
So you were a firefighter for the prison grounds, but you also were able to work outside of the prison grounds because of the the mutual aid relationship between your firehouse.
Correct. That's Amador County and El Dorado County have a mutual aid contract with the firehouse there. And so because they have that, they utilize our resources because we have all the engines and, stuff, so they can utilize us. And so we were able to work in that capacity. And so, I had a lot of experiences going through that. And still servicing the prison, of course.
So you had known for a while that you wanted to work in firefighting.
Correct.
But were there moments once you actually started doing the work where you realized, wow, this is really my calling? Like, what were those moments?
Yeah. Once I was there, I started really getting into it and learning a lot. But prior to that, I mean, you're talking about a guy that just came from the streets, didn't know nothing about this kind of stuff, and let alone starting off in LA County, level 4s and all that. And now you're like, hey, Mr. Herrera, you're going to be actually running medical calls. And like in my head, I'm like, we do this stuff? Like I remember telling a couple of the other guys, like, what the fuck? Like, what?
Yeah.
Insane.
And he's like, yeah, you're going to go respond. Da, 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 da. I was like, I'm thinking to myself, like, I don't know if I can do this, But one thing I did learn about myself, and I know I've known before, but learned was I love to like challenge myself learning things, right? And one of the things was learning all the material to pass and get certified to be a firefighter there. So they gave me this thick book. In California, whether you're working for the city, they have what they call the Jones and Bartlett is the criteria, the material they work off of curriculum, actually. And so for us, it was the IFSA, International Firefighter Training Association. So we worked off of that. So it's the same thing. And so I had to learn the book on my own, literally like chapter 1, chapter 2, go through all learning about the fire service, learning about the tools. And the process is each one had something you learned about. So one might be about hoses. You had to learn everything about hoses. And then you take a test. And then once you complete the test, if you pass it, you get to move on to what they call the manipulative skills test. So now you actually got to perform like, this is a hose. This is how you roll it up. This is what this is, a swivel, right? This is a gasket. This is a 2.5 inch hose. This is a 1/2 inch hose, 3 inch and 3/4. This is what kind of jacketing it has. So you have to give like a whole nomenclature on it. And once you get the chief or the captain will test you and you complete that, then you go on to the next one, so on and so forth. And once you complete your final, then you shadow. So you have to go through this whole testing
strenuous process, I would assume and imagined.
Yeah. And so you do that. And then, of course, medical, you learned your first responder medical.
Yeah.
And then CPR, you got to get your CPR card. So you do that. And once I started going through that and I started to get the niche, I was like, man, I thought I wasn't going to do so good, but I was scoring high, passing high. And then just my mindset, my thing is like, I wasn't happy with just like, okay, I was able to do something like when we would do like throwing ladders. My thing was like, I'm going to keep on practicing. I'd be out there till 11 o'clock at night.
You were building confidence in something that was really gratifying.
For sure. I mean, come on, I'm outside looking at the prison walls and I'm like, I could be in there. So I'm like, hell no, I'm not going back. I'm going to
about to throw this ladder like you've never seen.
Right? So that's exactly what it was. And so the captain saw that. Like they would be like, oh man, this guy's out here, putting in work 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. And then finally I completed everything and then I started shadowing, running calls.
Wow.
And yeah.
So when we were talking the other day, you told us a story that you kind of shared as a moment that you felt like, wow, this maybe is my calling. Can you please tell our audience the story of the call that we're talking about? Yeah.
So I had my first structure fire, and that in itself was like crazy. Like being
I can imagine
going into a burning building and
wow,
and just seeing these houses on fire and you're just extinguishing them. So yeah, but little by little, I started to, like you said, gain that confidence. I was like, man, I can do this. Mm-hmm. Well, I had already been certified and trained in CPR and had my card. Well, it just so happened that we got a call for a traffic collision on one of the main highways. And the city fire department were first on scene. And since the training academy, I own CAL FIRE, they have what they call a helispot. And we used it for life lighting patients out. And so I was with my company assigned LZ coordination, which is landing zone coordination. So like they were planning on life lighting the victims out. And so it turned out that this first collision was a 27-year sheriff deputy on his way to work and was on a head-on collision with the big rig. And he was being transported to us, right? I didn't know any of this at first.
Yeah.
It wasn't until we got there. And a little tidbit, unless a person has a heartbeat, you can't put them in a helicopter and life them out. They have to have a heartbeat.
Okay.
So that's why when he was en route, he coded. So they were coming to us. And as they came to us, that's when they told us, hey, we need you in here. Go to work. So I went straight into the back of the ambulance and was like, okay, we do pit crew CPR. So I was pumping on his chest, right, doing my compressions. And then from after my 2 minutes, and I go to his head and I start ventilating. And I started noticing, I was like, oh, he has a sidearm, like where, gun. And I can notice everything about him. I was like, is this guy a correctional officer? Or he's, he looked like one of the, I was like, oh, snap. And then in the back, as I'm giving him oxygen through a bag valve mask, right, I look in the back of the ambulance and I can see a line, like lined up of personnel, police officers, military. And I'm just like, holy shit, this guy's an officer. I'm pumping on the guy's chest. And I remember the paramedic like working on him and trying to save his life. And we worked him for like 40 minutes. Unfortunately, he succumbed to his injuries, right? And when we were done, we were requested, to exit. We exited. We stood by our engine. And I remember the wife of the officer was coming to pick up his body. And so we were given a flag, and he was like, my captain was like, can you do me a favor and just put the American flag over in the gurney and cover him? Wow. So I did. We carried him and put him in the back of the vehicle, the van. And all his brothers, are coming now. And as they're driving him off, we're at attention, saluting him as he's going. Now, mind you, I'm an inmate firefighter. So like, this is like kind of like crazy, right?
Kind of?
Yeah.
This is like, fucking insane.
Right? And so then I just remember his wife coming and saying, thank you. Thank you for trying to save my husband. And the officers and personnel coming to us and shaking our hand. Not all of them, but a lot of them did, because I think some of them already knew when they see our engine. One of them it'll say California Corrections, but it looks like your regular fire engine, but there is a sticker, right?
Do you wear what do you wear?
We wear, our gear that we wear is the exact same gear that you would see.
Wow.
Yeah. So our turnouts, our bunker gear, everything's the same. The only way up there, the way you can tell is we wear orange helmets, right?
Okay. Very small things though. You're not like blasted with CDCR prisoner or anything like that.
Yeah. You wouldn't even know. But that next morning they had the TV on in the living room and you see it in the news, sheriff deputy, traffic collision, accident, died, I'm like, and I'm just thinking like, holy shit. Mm. But that was in the back of my head, that kind of like planted a seed and said, hey, this is real. You're doing this.
Yeah.
You're doing this.
And you're really out in the world in the community, saving anybody's life who needs you. Doesn't matter if they've incarcerated you or what they've done to you. You're there to serve the community and to give back, and you're going to do it no matter what,
Yeah.
That's
how full circle is that?
It is full circle.
As an incarcerated firefighter trying to save a police officer's life.
Right. And then you think about it in this day where we're at today, what's going on is like, when a person's in need, a hero is just a person that's showing up and doing what others will not do in those moments, right? Yeah. Like at the end of the day, they defy all these odds and everything, and that's what you do. And so like we have that opportunity to do that. And so I think that's what they're starting to see. The public is starting to see like, we're getting that recognition that, hey, we're not just inmates anymore. We've put in the work and we're demonstrating that there's more to us than this,
Yeah. You're skilled professionals that are really adding to
the safety of the communities that you're in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, absolutely.
So people we think we're terrified of end up saving our lives.
Yeah, and that's so true. And every call that I went to, I always went into it with this mentality. And when I trained the guys that were there coming in, I always made it a point to share this with them. When they're servicing the community, treat this as if it is your own family member. Mm-hmm. If this is your mother, how would you want them to treat this person? Mm-hmm. How would you want, what kind of service? Be a professional of your trade, mm-hmm. Because people's lives depend on it. And they don't know that you're incarcerated. They just, they're there because you're in a moment where they need you, That puts it into perspective to a lot of them. Like, oh, wow. Like, yeah, that is true. Like, if that was my mom, I would want a firefighter to, do everything they could to save her life and help her. So
definitely.
So, yeah.
How much total time did you spend incarcerated?
Yeah, so a little shy of 18 years. And it was not, I would say, till 7 years, where a lot of the true change started to happen. And then once I was there, 2 years working in the capacity of the institutional firefighter.
So you did a little under 18 years. And when you got out, I think, you know, people have been so honed in on this, particularly on social media. And I just think we want to paint a picture of kind of what the path is and how difficult or maybe easy it is to like have a continuing career in this where you can do what you were doing, you know, in custody for a living and make money.
Yeah. What are the steps to becoming a firefighter after you are released?
So for me, I didn't even know. I didn't even think that there was a possibility due to the fact that, you know, when you have a record, it's challenging. But what I learned was there is a program, the Ventura Training Center. And so I had already known about Anti-Recidivism Coalition, ARC. My buddy of mine gave me a flyer for ARC. And so I remember like, oh, wow, okay, this had Scott Budnick and Michelle Garcia, who was previously incarcerated, were working on opening up this program in Ventura called the Ventura Training Center. Cool. And this was going to open up and allow individuals that had previously been incarcerated to transition and have the schooling and credentials and everything to do this. Well, I remember telling Mike, one of my captains, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go to the Ventura Training Center. And to go there, you have to actually have a recommendation. So they have to, there's an application process and you got to get a referral. And so I got all that. And it's 90 days before you're released, you have to start submitting that to the Ventura Training Center. So I did that. And then I remember I wrote, how would you say, like a mission statement type thing, you know? And I was like, for all of my life when I was young, I remember I used to run away from sirens. But now I actually am the one going. And people, you know, it's like, it's crazy.
You are the savior in that situation.
Yeah. And so when I wrote that, I was sharing about change and growth and everything I had been through.
Yeah.
And so I submitted that with my application and I scored real high on it being accepted. So I got a first callback. And so I came home and I just started working on getting my stuff together to go to this program. But
when did you get out of prison?
2020, December 2020.
Okay.
Yeah. So this program, like you were asking, like prior to that, I didn't think there was even an alternative opportunity for any of us, you know, but everything that I had already done and experienced, like, I mean, I had over 14 structure fires under my belt. 7 of those were going interior, right? So like I had like experience, a lot more experience than a lot of individuals that probably were real firefighters out here. So I was like, I can do the job. I just told myself I'm not going to give up. And to answer your question, right now that there's like a lot of light being shined on what we do, I do believe that there's going to be a lot more funding. People are going to be more open to these type of things. Because I know for a minute there, they were kind of concerned like, hey, how are we going to get people to be able to do this, you know, transition? And the program is successful. So that is just one of other programs that are now paving the way for individuals to be able to get and become, you know, a career firefighter. But you have to go through a vetting process. And then aside of that, you do have to get all the credentials. And then once you do that, you still have to apply.
And I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds with this, but I know that Gavin Newsom or Scott was really integral in Gavin Newsom passing, I guess it would be a law that said that you guys could get your
record expunged
Correct. To then be
AB 2147. So while I was there, that was one of the laws that had passed, the bills that had passed, and it was supposed to open up the path for individuals that wanted to become firefighters to be able to get their EMT license, get their national registry, right? It's not as easy as it seems because some of the stuff that individuals were facing was like, even though you got your record expunged, let's just say you were fortunate enough to be able to get it, there's certain red tape you have to get through because national registry is going to still turn you down because you have to have 10 years post-conviction of, you know, being clean before they're going to, you know, say, okay, yeah, you can go through the appeal process, but yet you may have done like 3 or 4 years, right, in fire camp. And then you come home and you, I don't know, let's just say you were locked up 5 years, but you haven't had 10 years post-conviction. So you get your record expunged, but yet you still have to wait before, you know, they're going to allow you to get your national registry. So there is like a little gray area, but for the most part, it still gives you that opportunity, you know. For me,
opens a ton of doors.
Yeah, for me, I didn't have that issue because I had already had like over 20 years post-conviction when that came. And the challenge was getting an expungement because for me, that was the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
You know, it's you have to really demonstrate that you earn it, you know. And so being out of LA County, that was something that was very challenging because LA County is just like, they're not going to really overturn a lot of things, you know. And so it's not easy. You've got to demonstrate, depending on what county you're in, determines if the judge is going to grant it or not. And you have to have strong supporting documents, you know, show that you're given that second chance, you know?
Yeah. So basically, once you're released, you have to have 10 years post-conviction. So after you were convicted of whatever crime.
Correct.
And a lot of people don't have that amount of time lapsed.
Correct.
So that's one challenge.
Correct.
A second challenge is just getting your record expunged in general, which you have to do in order to get your EMT license, is what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay, so that's another obstacle that people face. If you're able to overcome both of those obstacles, then you still have to apply to a program or take a bunch of tests, aptitude tests or whatever, and apply to a program and be accepted. Is that it?
Yeah. So that journey, that process will come after you. You'll go to the Ventura Training Center if you go there, because you can actually, anybody can go to a college and a fire program. Like you can sign up for a fire academy and pay the $4,000, $5,000 or whatever it costs to do it. The thing is if you're previously incarcerated, who's going to have that money? You know, that you don't have that. So what Ventura Training Center and a couple other programs offer is you get these credentials, certifications that allow you to be a firefighter. And the cool thing about it is they give you a stipend while you're there.
Got it.
You know?
For my own clarity, the Ventura Training Center is a place where you can go that you don't have to pay for. So it's not like going to another academy. You don't have to pay for it. In fact, they pay you a stipend while you're there.
Correct.
While you're there, you can be doing multiple things at once. You can be getting your record expunged.
Correct.
And you're also doing the training that you would be doing.
Correct.
At a fire academy.
That is correct. And the one thing that makes it very unique than any other place, and I've been told this time and time again from individuals that actually got their firefighter one certifications from like colleges and went to an academy, is they never got the hands-on experience. They were like fresh green when they first got hired on by wherever they got hired on. So they're going in there with no experience. So uniquely for us, not only did we have the experience previously as inmate firefighters, when you're there at the Ventura Training Center, once you get your wildland training and your certifications, now you're firefighter one cleared as a hand crew, and you can actually go fight fires.
Wow.
So you go fight fires, so you get your stipend a month, plus you get what they call your emergency bonus pay. So I don't know, I think it's like $19 now or $21 now an hour. So you're actually, while you're fighting those fires and you're learning and training and getting all those certs, you're getting paid to fight those fires. So I highly recommend anybody that's in that process to go, because you're getting something that no other place offers: experience.
How long? Okay, so you said you were released December 2020. How long have you been a firefighter in the free world? And what are some of your most rewarding moments? Kind of.
Yeah. Okay.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
Free world
Incredible.
firefighter.
Yeah. It's crazy. Like the stuff that I've experienced and seen. But so in total, I have like 6 years of fire service experience. But out here, I would say 4 years, going on 4 years now. But the station I worked at and the community I service, I'm actually at the beach, or was. I mean, since I transferred and promoted, I'm no longer at that station. But where I was at, I was literally working at the beach. So when I wake up in the morning, have my coffee, I'm overlooking the ocean.
Wow.
Which is
What station was it?
Station 11 in Cayucas.
Wow.
Right next door to Morro Bay. It's a brand new station. Matter of fact, it opened in October 2024 is when it actually was open. So we opened it. I was part of the flag ceremony and it was crazy. So your question was, being part of that flag ceremony, I raised the flag to open up that station.
Aww.
And then I experienced also my first 4th of July in the community, which is we were in a parade and just like,
wow,
it's a big thing.
So special.
So then just like, seeing the kids and stopping, answering
You're
questions.
Wow, that is so special.
Yeah.
You guys really are the heroes of the world too.
It's crazy. Like
it's incredible.
Yeah. It's really cool. And, having those like experiences, like it's awesome. And then of course, bringing my family to see that, get on the engine, experience that, meet my captain. Yeah. That's pretty badass.
Can I ask you, what does it mean to you now when someone calls you a hero? Like, how does that make you feel?
I don't know. It's just my My idea of a hero is different than what mostly I look at it like everybody's a hero in some way or another. Like it's just a matter of like showing up in those times of needs, That's really what it is.
I love that.
But I would say it's more so for my kids. My kids, I look at it more so like I want them to be able to say, Dad went through this, experienced this, but he changed it and he was able to do something different. And if he did that, then I can do almost anything,
Fuck yeah.
So
Beautiful.
That's what it is to me. Like, what really matters is if my kids would one day just look at it and say, oh, he's my hero, Like I see my dad as my hero. That's really what I look at it. I'm like, yeah. But like for the public, I look at it like I would do that even if I wasn't a firefighter. Where I'm at today in my journey in life is like, I would still want to be there for somebody in need, So now I just have the platform to be able to do it,
You're doing it, dude.
Really?
So, yeah.
How do you think that society can be convinced that people who have once committed crimes have the capacity to change and evolve?
Oh, that's an easy question for me, actually. You know what people trust in life is consistency.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Being consistent. It's as simple as that. Like, you're not going to change people's minds. Words are nothing. Mm-hmm. It's our actions that validate our words. So having this conversation about everything is really not going to matter until there's action and consistency every day demonstrating that change, right? And so for me, that is why I do what I do. Every time I wake up, I make sure that I'm that physical change, right? One choice at a time, because that is what people look for. They want to see that consistent. And that can go across anything, relationships,
Yes.
Being consistent,
Absolutely.
Right? People trust that. That's what trust
safety.
is.
That's what safety is.
Yeah. So for me, the way you're going to change the narrative and change people's minds, it's really simple. It's just being consistent and them seeing that consistency. Like, and if they do, then that's where it's going to happen. But it starts with individuals as myself, that are now starting to they're starting to see it. And now there's conversations happening, and ones that are coming home that they're starting to see, they're like, yeah, those guys are incarcerated, but they're heroes. They're doing this and that. So now they're like, okay, we have individuals that are doing it now that are already transitioning, have done it and are doing it. So they're like, okay, there's the connection, the consistency, right? And still doing it. And so as long as that continues, I think that that's where people will start to be like, and they'll start to normalize that, right? In a way, in a positive way, And so I think that that's it. Just action and being consistent.
In this discussion this last week around these fires,
right?
There's the conversation around the incarcerated individuals making $1 an hour, fighting these fires and risking their lives, and how 30% of the workforce estimated out there is incarcerated firefighters. What do you think about that? Do you feel like that pay is ethical? For me, I struggle with it personally, but I also know that the program seems amazing and very transformative. So it's tricky, but.
Yeah. So that one is a tough discussion. Let me explain to you why. Because, totally agree. They should not get paid that. But I also think there should be certain things in place to be able to, if you do give more money, and I think you should, educating as far as money management and what to do with it. Because I know for me, I was not fortunate enough. I made $56 a month as in the work that I did as an institutional firefighter, which was nothing compared to what they make. They make $1 an hour. And so you can go to fight a fire. You're getting paid as soon as you leave the camp, 24 hours, you're on the clock. If you go to a camping fire, that can go for 3 weeks, a month. You just cashed in all that money in it, and that's in a month. And I made $56 that whole month, no matter what I did. No matter what I did, it was not going to matter. And just to back up, for me, I never did it for the money because it was the journey. It was the transition. It was a mental process for me. So for me, it wasn't about the money. But when I think about what you're asking about that, we're the ones that put in that boots on the ground, hard laborers work. We do what others don't want to do. Even in the fire service, when inmate hand crews come, or even with us, they're happy to see us because they're like, oh shit, these are the guys that we want here because they're going to get that work done. Because we have more to prove, and just the work ethic, it's crazy. But as far as money, 100%, I do think that it should be more. But at the same time, I do believe that there should be some type of education and there's some type
I think financial literacy is something that most people need to learn. The transition into adulthood, making your own money no matter where you come from, learning how to budget and how to save and spend
100%. That's
in a safe way for yourself to maintain your own safety is something everyone needs to learn. But I think both of us agree with you that for people to be willing to risk their lives for the sake of their communities and not be paid fairly or similarly at all to others who are doing the same work, it's definitely exploitative.
It is. And I think that's the biggest challenge. And I think that's the argument to be said. It's like, well, you committed a crime, right? So like, why should we pay you for this, right? Because they're in the public's mind or even people's mind that create these laws, they're like, you committed a crime, so why should we be paying you? You should be grateful to be able to do that, right? So I get that part of the argument, but at the same time, is like, unless you actually put yourself in that person's shoes and you do believe, like that's what rehabilitation is, right? It's about change, growth, and offering these things. So for the most part, a lot of guys are just like happy to just get what they get.
Yeah.
But is it exploitation? The argument could be said, yeah, there is some exploitation because the work that you do in the workforce, like, I think if I had like more money and they were giving me more money, I definitely would, if anything, help out my family, which a lot of them do. They send money home. They'll send money home to,
absolutely.
Yeah, like, hey, I want my mom.
Well, I think that's, since we're already into it, let's just get into it. But I think that is a really important part of talking about paying someone who's incarcerated. I mean, there's so many layers to it. One being, because somebody committed a crime, why should we then be able to use them for whatever we want for our own benefits? How did that become layered in with the punishment of incarceration, then stealing their labor and all of the money that they could earn in a legal, ethical way that they could use to support themselves and support their families? Why are we entitled to that? Why is incarceration tied up into labor and into
private businesses making money?
Yes.
No, for sure. Prison industrial complex. There's like so much to it. Like I agree 100%.
Yeah. And so I think that when talking about what demographic of person is most commonly incarcerated, they are lower on the socioeconomic totem pole. Yeah. And those families suffer not just emotionally and mentally and spiritually, but they really suffer financially with their loved ones being incarcerated. And if somebody is willing to work a job, let alone one that you risk your life for, but if they're willing to work a legal job at all, and for us to say, no, you don't deserve to get paid for that, even though you're walking the straight and narrow, working a job, first of all, what type of lesson does that teach somebody? That no matter what they do, they're not worthy of getting paid. Yeah. But then also, it does nothing to rehabilitate the hole that is left in their family by them being gone. So people deserve to get paid, and people are risking their lives to save ours, and we are still having the audacity to say that they don't deserve to get paid for that.
Yeah. No, and I think about it also in the sense of like, if you did raise the pay, I mean, that would only incentivize a lot of individuals now to just work harder to get into these programs, to be able to work and then learn. And the success rate would be that much more greater as far as, because I just know from personal experience, when you do programs like Fire Camp, Institutional Firehouse, you learn a lot of good work ethic, camaraderie, following direction. And so that can transition to when you come home. I hear it all the time from everybody, like, man, I loved it when I was working out there on the line, because you build this brotherhood, sisterhood, you know what I mean? You're just like, I love it. So yeah, right now, like, it is supposed to be voluntary, like, but like, at least for us as an institutional firefighter, like $56 a month, like, who's going to want to do that? I mean, I wanted to do it regardless, but like, you are risking your life in many ways. I think more people would probably be more inclined while they're in there to like want to be like, yeah, raise my hand. Let me do that. Let me stay, let me stay out of the trouble. Let me stay out of the bullshit to be able to do it. But right now, like you said, like, still people want to go, but that much more if you pay them what they're worth in regards to that, like you said. So.
All right, final question. And then we're gonna release you back to the wild.
What you got?
What do you think your life's mission is at this point?
Oh man, I can summarize it very easily, but I mean, there's so much I can go in depth. But to be a service of others, like that's it. And so, no matter how that looks, whether it's in the fire service or whether it's in a community doing something, giving back, going back to the prisons like you guys do, giving hope. That's it, and that's what to be in service of others is. So for me, my passion is to help others, and if it's saving a life, okay. But if it's not, if it's just helping somebody process their trauma, and heal, that's it.
just helping someone process their trauma and heal. Like, it's a small thing.
It's amazing. But to me, honestly, it's a process, but it's internal. And a lot of it has to do with acceptance and letting go and forgiving.
Yeah.
And it's just, and then every day making those one choices a day just to say, I'm going to do better. That's it. And if you can do that, like, man, it's crazy. Like it becomes easy. You don't even have to think about it anymore. I may leave you guys with this one thing. I had somebody when I was in there tell me, he's like, how do you know you've changed, right? Like, how do you really know you've changed? What does change look like and all that? I'm like, and so I remember them saying to me sometime, he's like, man, it's so hard to do good. And I was like, nah, man, it's so hard to do bad. That's when I knew I had changed. That's when I knew up here, I was like, my awareness, my moral compass, everything, I was aware. So that's the difference.
I love that.
That's sick.
That's awesome. Let's go, Eddie. Thank you so
amazing.
much.
Thank you, Eddie.
Mic drop.
Yep.
Eddie the legend.